Hey everybody, Father Peter here. Look who I have. Can you believe these other two Brady Bunch screens I've got here? I got Father Justin, I got Reverend Elizabeth. And the three of us, we are clergy here from St. Mark's, are here today to speak with you about the issues that we find in our spiritual and mental health. One of the things we often talk about is that Jesus said that to love one another as I have loved you. By this, the world will know that you are my disciples. We take that very seriously in our world to be a community of love. And being a community of love means that we care for one another in love. And the care that we have for one another and amongst us all, it takes the whole body to care for each other. But much of that care does end up touching the clergy. So I've got Justin and Elizabeth here today to say a word about what it is that they're experiencing personally and what it is that they're experiencing amongst all of us as the body of Christ. So Justin, we're all part of the same business. We share all kinds of things, but we also do have areas that we have particular responsibility. And we say that you're in charge of pastoral care. What a heavy duty thing that is to say. So I wonder if you might just say a word to us about what it is that you're seeing in the pastoral care world.
Totally. Thanks, Father Peter. The first thing I would say is the people of St. Mark's are incredible. You're all such incredibly gracious and strong people. And so I am in the conversations that I know all three of us have, and certainly the ones that I have, I'm amazed by the strength and the resilience that the people of the parish, through what is undoubtedly an unprecedented and just wild and crazy event. That said, I think that I can feel in my conversations anyway with the people of the parish that we're all getting tired. Mm. The pandemic is turning into something of a grind. I was on the weekly Zoom call with the confirmation students last night with Syra, and the confirmands are all basically 8th and 9th graders, and they were speaking about the fact that the schools in Connecticut are not going to go back in person, and they were remarking that their pandemic schedules had lost their novelty. Initially not having class was kind of cool, but now it's just a grind. It's just an ordinary, regular thing. And so repeatedly, they would answer my request for them to tell me the high and the low of their week by just saying, well, my week didn't have a high or a low. It was just a pandemic week. And that's where I think we all are. We're all like my 8th graders. And I think I'm in particular observing three kind of emotional reactions in myself and in others. I think we're all grieving, for one thing. At the very least, we are grieving, as my therapist put it to me yesterday, the loss of our lifestyles, the loss of being able to go to the grocery store and it be normal, or going to see friends and family and it being normal. We're just grieving the loss of the normal that we experienced 3 weeks ago. I think we're also grieving something even more than that. We're grieving something which makes us human. Human beings are social animals, made for each other, made for real and not just virtual hugs, real and not just virtual handshakes and so on. And the loss of that physical connection really is something that takes a toll on us. And we have to grieve that, as well as grieving the incredible number of deaths that our nation and our world has suffered, and our community, including our community at St. Mark's. Some related to COVID-19, many of which are not related to COVID-19 most recently, but which are still incredibly sad. And the fact that we're not able to, the fact that our regular ways of gathering for worship and to mourn them is incredibly disruptive to us. And in the mix of that too, we're not only grieving what we've lost, but we're also anticipating having to grieve other things we're going to lose. So in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed the word "if" creep into a lot of our conversations. It's like, it's not when we come back to church, it's if we come back to church. It's not when we go to the opera, it's if we go to the opera. It's not when do we go to a baseball game, it's if we go to a baseball game. And I think that, at one level, we're emotionally trying to prepare ourselves for the changes that are coming down the pike. And there undoubtedly are changes. But I think that in my case anyway, I'm struggling not to mourn things which I may, in fact, in the end, not have to mourn. There's a passage in the Gospels where Jesus says that today has enough trouble for today. And I kind of think we have enough grief for today. Asking ourselves to start to grieve all the things we worry we might lose can be totally overwhelming. The third thing that I'm observing is a lot of anger. And this is, anger not at any particular thing, or perhaps it's anger directed towards a particular thing. We see a lot of this in the public sphere, people who are frustrated with our political leaders, frustrated with community leaders, and so on. You see it in things like, I saw on Facebook a sign from a protester in Hartford the other day that said, hashtag COVID is fake, or something like that. And I think that anger of that sort is certainly present in our midst, but also anger that's harder to put one's finger on. Anger like what I felt this morning around 10:30 when I was playing my piano over here, and I have to say, I just started to bang on the thing, and I banged it so hard that I threw G above middle C completely out of tune. I didn't know my piano could get any more completely out of tune than it already was, but I'm telling you, it was. I don't know where this anger came from. I think it's just frustration building and building and building, the frustration of the grind, and it had to go somewhere. And I have to say, the piano's not a terrible place to put it. I'm very concerned about the other places, the other ways that we direct our anger, which are even more destructive than me banging my piano out of tune. In any case, I think, we're both incredibly strong and resilient, but also we're cracking a little bit.
Well, wouldn't you know that G took the crack? That's really quite something that G above C took it. So thank you for that. What an incredible review of such a complexity that we have. Elizabeth, you amongst the three of us have really the most difficult formula for life here. You're home. You've got Charlie, who's 6. You're supposed to be taking care of Charlie. You're supposed to be homeschooling Charlie. You're supposed to be taking care of people in your job. You're supposed to be preaching. You're supposed to, and you haven't been off your little plot of land in a month. So, it's great that you're still with us. Just a word about the world according to you. And
yeah, well, thanks, Justin. I really resonate with so much of what you said, and filtered through life with a child. It's a little bit with a twist. But yeah, I think that my situation is like any parent right now who's been thrown into the role of homeschool teacher. And, there's the sense of not just an added thing to do, it's just a complete restructuring of life and a complete reordering of priorities and demands and expectations. And each day can either crumble into a heap of frustration and disappointment and total failure, if not meltdown and physical struggles and everything. Or, you could just have sometimes I end with numbness. I've just gotten through the day, clawed through it, and there's no sense of what happened or what went well or not. But we've been in this now about, in my case, I guess I feel like it's been about 7 weeks or so. And, the first 6 of them, I would say, were actually completely unmanageable, and just, I couldn't see which way was up. I can imagine what it would be like to be in a shipwreck where everything's tumbling under the water and you can't figure out which way is up and what's going to float to the top and what's going to make it to the top. And, now I feel like, okay, with all these ifs creeping in, I've had to pull back and say, okay, what do I want for my son? And none of this is what any parent wants their children to go through, especially when childhood is supposed to be full of learning and wonder and friends and experiences. And speaking of wired for social life, children, really do so well in social situations. And it's really hard, especially when you have one child with no siblings, to keep them engaged, entertained, and socialized, So sometimes a kid's raised by wolves, but in some cases you're raising a wolf, and it's really hard. But you know, I think that setting expectations has become my spiritual practice, where I'm trying to see the continuum of the before and after pandemic, where, you know, our ideal as religious and faithful people is always the same goal, is to tune our lives to where God is in each day, in each moment, and look for that. I like that line in morning prayer. We say, seek the Lord where he wills to be found. You know, call upon him when he draws near. It's like, okay, if my gym instructor on my app is telling me something I can use, I'm going to grab onto that like it's God himself, and it feeds me. And sometimes it's Charlie's teachers or the school counselor who has, you know, word of wisdom that's like nutrition that day. So, you know, I think that we keep to keep my eyes open and look for the solidarity in the community that's available, that has wisdom and a sense of togetherness, because I think parents can feel very isolated, and even when they're doing it together, and there may be siblings in the house, people have their jobs to juggle, and they now have to teach their kids school, and you know, if they have multiple children, sometimes they have completely different schedules and different demands, and not every child resonates with this two-dimensional interaction. And in my household, it's a complete anathema to the way my son wants to learn. And so you know, I think just finding a place of success and happiness at the end of each day, and a contentment that we're together, we're healthy, and we have a place to live. I mean, people are suffering tremendous losses of jobs and sometimes relatives and all that kind of stuff, not to mention the routines and the things we wanted to do and the things we hold dear, or just going out to restaurants, you know, not having to cook a meal and a week would be so nice, or clean up. But you know, there's just, everything is upside down and reordered. So I think that's the place where I think that can become the teacher. You know, what do we do in a time of disorder when you cannot have things in the order that you want them to manage? So what I'm experiencing is just that sense of chaos, where in the chaos I have to find some calm and some peace. And it's really not I'm talking about every hour has its own sense of that. And so in each hour or moment, I have to choose, am I going to follow this path of frustration, anger, and let it build up and let it explode? Or can I just let it go and breathe and choose to let that one pass? And so my expectations have been a completely yo-yo for all these weeks. And I think little by little, I'm finding a more calm waters where I can let a lot go. One thing I think parents might be feeling is just this grief or overwhelming sense that, you know, my kid's going to fall behind, or maybe the dreams I had for age 6, 7, 10, 12 are not going to be realized. You know, tennis lessons might not happen, camp can't happen, you know, study abroad, whatever people have in mind, that just is not happening. And with children, you know, everyone has these high hopes and dreams for what they might experience. And to have it all stuck at home now, these sound like high class problems, but you know, whatever level wherever people are with that, I think there is a sense that we're out of control of what we had in mind. So I think that's a perennial condition in life, and here it is under the pandemic context, but it's more so. But you know, that's what I'm hearing that I'm also experiencing. It's just this juggling, the chaos, the confusion, the lack of control, and the dashed expectations in general, but also in each day, that can really take you aside. So a lot to learn from in that.
You know, such incredible, thank you for sharing all that. Really, really incredible. Usually when people share, I say beautiful, but I'm not saying beautiful to them. Wow. We have spoken as a team before about people developing resilience. We're not given resilience. We develop resilience from life. And perhaps we are developing the tools of resilience that our elders have. Perhaps our kids are developing resilience. Justin, you've been spending so much of your academic work and pastoral work around the question of what it means to be fully alive and the question of joy. I wonder if you might say something about joy and resilience and how you make of that now.
Totally. I'll say it's one thing to study joy and it's another thing to feel it. I'm by no means a joy expert in the most, in that latter, most important sense. But I will say that joy takes work. Human beings are not actually hardwired for joy. It takes some rewirements, as it were. That's a term that I've stolen from a Yale professor named Laurie Santos, who teaches a class called Psychology and the Good Life, which has gotten some incredible press recently. And she's been teaching it during the pandemic, actually, on Coursera, and has had a really interesting, very profound response to it. And her course has not only requirements, but rewirements. These are things which, from her perspective as a psychologist, we need to do, habits we need to form, different ways of thinking that are more amenable to well-being and flourishing, more amenable to joy. I think that I sometimes think about joy in my own life as like having to take my probiotic. If I take my probiotic for a while, at a certain point, it feels like, okay, I'm good. No more problems. I'm fine. I can stop taking the probiotic. And then guess what? As soon as I stop, down the tubes. The same is true, actually, of joy. If I don't build into my day things that bring me life, then lo and behold, I don't end up having a good day. I think about this not just from a psychological perspective. That's interesting to me as a theologian because it kind of corroborates what we've always known for like 2,000 years of Christian history. But the real biblical touchstone is just in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, I think it's the 4th chapter, invites the people of God to set their mind on things which are good and noble and lovely and so on. Go check it out. It's like chapter 4, verse 8, I think. Whatever is good, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, think on these things. Paul is saying it takes practice actually to think on good and noble and worthy things. And so if you occupy your mind and your soul with those things for a period of time each day, it really can have an effect. I mean, that for me, most recently, it has involved 3 things. One is like making time to play video games. That sounds ridiculous, but again, some of my 8th graders are glad that I said that. So it involves video games. It involves playing my piano, even though I banged it out of tune. And it involves reading and listening to books on tape. Things which, before the pandemic happened, were the things which already made my life joyful. Try to remember those things and make sure that I'm not losing them in the midst of the day-to-day grind, the stress of living in a pandemic. I think also that Christians are in some way, I know that I just said that human beings are not wired for joy, but Christians are built for it in a way, and built for joy in difficult circumstances. The pandemic is a particular kind of suffering, one which is registered in each of us in a different way. And to be sure, the least of these, as our Lord himself calls them, are suffering the most these days. But we're all suffering something. And Christians have known for generations that the way of the cross, the way of suffering, is in the end the way of life. And that is, I think, that hope that we have, that resurrection always has the last word, is the secret to not giving in to despair. At least that's been true for me. I'll tell you, there was a moment also earlier this morning. It was in the vicinity of having banged on my piano and it took a G above middle C out of key, where I was standing in my kitchen and I decided I was going to have a word with God. I knew I needed to say some very holy prayers for some very needy people, some people who really needed my prayers. And I have to say, I kind of gave up, and I told God how I actually felt, which was, God, I would really like it if people would stop dying. I would really like it if people stopped getting sick. Now, I can't sit here and tell you how I believe God is going to answer that prayer. But I will tell you that it brought me some peace to just tell my Lord how I actually felt instead of trying to be somebody else. I don't know that it was joy that I felt, but it was at least peace.
Wow, how beautiful is that? Thank you for sharing that too. I mean, ask and seek and knock, and just the very letting go-ness of telling the truth. That's what the Psalms are all about, telling the truth. Elizabeth, picking up on what Justin just said about letting go, for everything there is a season, and this season is a rough season for you in so many ways, and you've had to let go. I mean, you're constant moment by moment here. Do you just have a word before we go about, you've already spoken eloquently about how it is that you try to move from survive to thrive, but just a word of reflection on anything Justin just said?
Well said, Justin. I always go back to this line from a woman named Paula Darcy. She had a tragedy in her life, and she said, God comes to you disguised as your own life. And, I think that no matter, there's the sense in this pandemic that, someday we'll get back to real life, but in a sense, whatever your life is real that day. And this is real life, and it's nothing any of us anticipated, but I feel like I am settling into that a little bit, that, this is life right now. It is not at all how I imagined it would be right now or at any time. And I really want to find the life and the thriving place within this non-thriving condition. And I say that as a human being, not even as a priest. I do say it as a priest, but I really have to live it. And it's very, very a high challenge, and yet we're only asked to do what we can in each moment. So I think that for me, the practice of being in the moment, whether you do that through a meditation practice or just remind yourself moment by moment, this is real life. We don't have a real life to go back to. There was a biopic or something by a woman in the 80s called Blown Sideways Through Life. And it was her autobiography of all the twists and turns her life took. And it was really funny, a monologue that she did. And I think about that. We're all being blown sideways through life. And we never did control how we're going to live or die or be well, or where our jobs are going to take us, or how our kids are going to turn out. I think this pandemic just puts in high relief all the realities that were already there, and we just have to face them in double time and right up in our faces. And as Justin was saying, well, I lost my train of thought on that one, but it's a time, we're all suffering together. That's what you were saying, is that we're all suffering this together to whatever degree. And that's a reality too. We always were in everything together, and we couldn't always see it. So I think that's another piece, that even in our isolation, somehow we're connecting more thoroughly, and, in terms of communicating and thinking about people to call. And when we talk here, we are looking at each other. So I don't feel like something new. I don't feel like everything's new. I think everything we can see it in a new way. And we're being asked to enter into life in a new way that we didn't have to before, but it's going to teach us something. It's teaching me. I'm not trying to say we're all going to learn from this. I'm trying to say, what can I learn? Because that's how I'm going to get through these days without losing my marbles. And I also want my son to feel like life is happy in each day too. I don't want it to be a big struggle and a big bummer every single day. And we should have fun with what kind of mask we're going to wear, and try to find some joy in the burden as the small and large burdens of it all. And that's a big challenge. So I think that that's where, we've been through Lent. We know how to live in Lent and flog ourselves in certain ways, but we find a very hard time finding joy, like Justin said. We have to challenge ourselves to harness the joy that can be found. And it may be minuscule, but in the good meal you put together or whatever, these things add up. And I think it's really, really important. And they just add up to inviting God into our lives and inviting God around our table and being together. So here he is right now.
Hey, Charlie!
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all, that's where I'm at. I just feel like it's the moment by moment choices of where God might be.
Well, thank you for that. And Justin, thank you for, you both have shared your lives with us. And I know I speak for everybody who's going to be watching this to say that we are grateful to each of you and to both of you for your open-souled time that you just spent with us. And to all of you out there, as I said at the outset here, we have a great desire to care for you, that you might be well in your humanity. This is a most human moment for all of us. You'll see attached below here also the 10 habits, 10 holy habits to stay calm and carry on that I put together a week or two ago. These are habits that all people of our faith come and go with, but they're touchstones that you can return to. We do want you to know that we have every desire and every prayer that you be well and fully alive to the glory of God. If you find yourself in a most difficult time, I hope you'll reach out to Beth Ralston. She's coordinated our care for each other because we desire to be a community of love and to have you be a part of that and to care for you. So peace and blessings. Justin in your blue room, cool. Elizabeth with looks like some of you great and some of Charlie's artwork behind you and a photo bomb of Charlie too. Okay, everybody out there in TV land, God bless you and thank you so much. We'll be seeing you again real soon. Thanks again to both you guys. Okay, take care.